Good morning, everyone. To those of you joining from Washington, D.C. and points east. And of course, good afternoon to those of you coming from London and Western Europe. And good evening to those of you coming from Eastern Europe and Turkey. Everyone, to those of you joining from... I feel like I was the announcer for Eurovision contest for a second. I'm joking. My name is Soner Cagaptay. I'm the Bayer Family Fellow and Turkish Research Program Director here at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Welcome to today's Policy Forum discussion on Turkey's historic May 14 vote that's going to take place in less than 2 days. As Turkey revs up for elections, we have put together an amazing panel of global experts for you. I'll introduce my colleagues in a minute. We'll look at election outcomes, what to expect, what lies ahead. Let me explain the process a little bit. Turkey's citizens, nearly 64 million registered voters, will cast their ballots on Sunday. 2 ballots simultaneously for parliament and presidency. We'll have an outcome for the parliament. The presidency, though, is not a direct path. Someone needs to get 50% of the vote. Looks like among the top candidates, opposition candidate Kilicdaroglu and President Erdogan, neither could make it there, which means that a runoff is likely in 2 weeks' time after May 14th on May 28th. So Turkey is going into quite an historic political era of 2 weeks of a number of votes. An historic vote because either President Erdogan will win, and he'll arguably, conceivably stay at Turkey's helm while he's on the scene, or the opposition will win and Turkey will revert to a different kind of government. In foreign policy terms, this is an era of dramatic change. I can see Turkey's foreign policy continue to be coldly transactionalist as it has been under President Erdogan in case of an Erdogan win, and then Turkey aligning more closely with the transatlantic community if the opposition wins. There's a lot more context to this, of course, this what I've just summarized for you guys. And to flesh this out, I've invited 3 colleagues and friends to join us. I'll introduce them to you now, and then the way we're gonna run this is each will speak briefly. I'll pose some questions. I'll also add some comments of my own at the end as a 4th panelist. We'll take questions from you. You can type them into the chat box. And if you are listening to us on YouTube, I know we have thousands of people dialing in right now. Please email your questions to policyforum@washingtoninstitute.org. We'll triage these questions. I'll try to get as many of them into the room as possible. Let me introduce the panel first. I think starting from further east, so Ragip Soylu from Ankara. Ragip, thank you for coming today. Ragip is the Ankara Turkey Bureau Chief of Middle East Eye, previously served in Washington for various Turkish outlets, from Sabah to ATV. He has an excellent newscast, but also presence on the internet in general, and as an analyst, as well as having a digest. If you have not signed up for it, I would definitely recommend you to go for it. Ragip, good to see you, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Soner. Thank you for the kind words as well.
Absolutely. Look forward to a great discussion. Moving closer to Washington, the West now, Seren Selvin Korkmaz. She's in Istanbul, the director of Istanbul. It's a Istanbul-based research center. She's also a visiting fellow at the Middle East Institute here in Washington, and as well as being a researcher at Stockholm University's Institute of Turkish Studies. Seren is an avid observer of Turkey's opposition, its strategies, rights and frequent commentary on the media, and extremely excited to have you on the panel with us, Seren, as well, and good to see you.
Thank you, Soner.
Yeah. Finally, in London, Emre Peker, he's the Europe Director for Eurasia Group, a research firm, obviously. Emre was a journalist in his previous life. It's how we met some years ago, working for the Wall Street Journal, had excellent reporting on Turkey, NATO issues, and Turkey's economy, as well as having been a member of a Pulitzer Prize nominated team that reported from Turkey in the aftermath of the 2016 failed coup attempt. Between the 4 of us, I think we have enough to cover. So without further ado, I'd like to turn to my colleagues. I have decided that the format will be that we'll go through the panelists, and then at the end, open the floor for questions. And hopefully this will also help allow us to engage each other and push back a little bit and get some really good results on what to expect. So Ragip, turning to you, what to expect on May 14th outcome, presidency and parliament. We're having 2 different votes, obviously. Assuming there's going to be a runoff for presidential race, what is President Erdogan's game plan in your view in the run-off period of that 2 weeks? And some analysts are at least suggesting, will he contest the outcome? The floor is yours, Ragip. Thank you so much, and look forward to listening to you.
Thank you for the introduction and the kind words again, Soner. A lot of questions over there, but to begin with, I mean, all the polls indicate that there's an increasing likelihood for a second round, and the polls indicate that there's a greater chance for the Erdogan alliance to retain the majority in the parliament. But it's a really tight race, so it's hard to know. But my personal opinion, I think there's a greater chance for Kilicdaroglu to declare victory in the first round with a narrow margin. I already wrote this to my newsletter and declared it on Twitter, so I don't see any point not to say here as well. Second, if it goes to second round, I think the Erdogan strategy will be based on emotions. He would basically campaign on as his last term, as a momentous moment, in the sense that he has this Turkish century vision, the last things that he wants to deliver and he wants to achieve. But in the same time, I hear that he might play in another strategy based on names and personas that could be more captivating and capturing for his voters, such as assigning two important names for the vice presidential positions. One of them might be Mehmet Şimşek, who knows, that's very speculative, to basically increase the trust into his economic policies. And the other name might be the Hakan Fidan. This is also speculation as well. But he might play that vice presidential cards to basically increase trust into his team and his administration, because as you know, there are a lot of questions about his unorthodox monetary policy and the his unorthodox monetary policy and economy has been his Achilles heel. In terms of the election night, whether if, for example, Kilicdaroglu wins in the first round and whether he would contest the race, I think it just depends on the margins. If it's really narrow margin, of course he will ask for a recount. And it also goes for the opposition as well. If the Erdogan victory with a narrow margin, they would also ask for a recount. But other than that, I find this little bit conspiratory to talk about if he loses the elections straight and square, that he wouldn't leave. I mean, there is no precedent. Turkish electoral system is really transparent based on the direct participation of the political parties. CHP, I mean, Kilicdaroglu has been saying that they've been working on their electoral system and the security safeguards for 1.5 years. They will be in every ballot box all around the country. They're in the district level. They're in Ankara. So, if there's foul play, there will be really, transparently be proven. So I don't really have much worries about the Turkish electoral system and the safeguards and the checks we have over there. Of course, it might get tense. There might be fights, as we see in every election in Turkey. But other than that, I'm not really concerned that if there's a, straight and square Kilicdaroglu victory, we don't see any, cling to power or playing a trump card.
Thank you, Ragip. Appreciate these opening remarks. I'll come back to you. And I want to move on to Seren now and ask her the same questions. What is your expectation for the presidential and the parliamentary vote? And what is the opposition strategy in the runoff? And Ragip said that if the election is fair and square, he doesn't expect President Erdogan to contest it. But some analysts have said if the margin is really narrow, maybe 1% or less, President Erdogan could contest the outcome. In this hypothetical off scenario, how would the opposition react if that were the case?
Thank you, Soner. Actually, first of all, my expectation is also that the opposition can win in the first round with not a high margin, but with a small margin. Especially
by win, you mean a presidential vote, yes?
I mean presidential vote, okay, yeah. First, especially the withdrawal of the third candidate, Inces, might affect the electoral results. But even if he didn't withdraw, I think his votes are decreasing very fast. So that I was expecting the chance of electability of Mr. Kilicdaroglu in the first round is high. However, still depends on the polls. We have to be cautious about that. So it seems that it might be go to the second round. And Mr. Erdogan's strategy is really based on this second round. For the parliamentary majority, it's a little bit difficult to predict, but my prediction is also with the HDP, with the Third Alliance voters. I think the opposition have a chance to get the parliamentary majority as well. So someday we might have a surprising electoral results in Turkey on behalf of opposition, but still there are so many factors which make this predictability difficult. First of all, the registration of the people who lives in earthquake areas. Secondly, some people like students, whether they will be able to go to the places that they registered for their voice. And the third factor is that the motivation of Erdogan's supporters, but previous Erdogan supporters who are not happy with the current government. So that this is the aura that we have when we go to the polls. But Mr. Erdogan has mainly invested in the second round, as Ragip mentioned. It's not possible for him to get this election in the first round. That's why their strategy is the second round. So that if Erdogan gets the parliamentary majority in the first round, also, he will make sure that he can show his supporters that, okay, let's see, I'm powerful, I'm still in the power, and so let's support me, and we will have a more stable country. Regarding the opposition, actually, their strategy based on to get this election in the first round. But still, despite of this tense electoral dynamics in Turkey, mainly pushed by the government, the opposition try to follow a calm strategy. They try to stay calm, and they pursue an inclusive and positive political campaign, so that they try to catch voters who are not happy with the AKP. Especially, I don't know actually what's their plan for the second round, because it's not the thing that they talk so much. However, we can say that the opposition, first of all, if the margin is low, they will definitely they will try to claim their votes. But if the margin is high, I think there won't be any problem regarding to the power transition, as Ragip mentioned, because there are so many problems related to the electoral fraud in Turkey, but still Turkish people see the elections is their only democratic means to participate in politics. That's why they are really sensitive to the polls. And when the current government didn't accept the results of 2019 elections, actually it didn't it didn't go well for them, because the AKP supporters turned to opposition because they think that there was injustices. So Turkish people are also sensitive. That's why I don't know whether this kind of strategy will work. And in case of a runoff, there might be an increasing tension in Turkey, and especially the government's discourse is being so harsh towards the election. So they arguing that the elections is a kind of coup attempt. So and Erdogan says that we should be prepared, like as if in the June 15 coup d'etat attempt night. So these are the things that the elections seems like a war in Turkey. So, but the opposition tried to be stay calm. So I think even if there will be a second round, the opposition pursues this strategy. And they will be also so cautious about the electoral security, and they will make sure that they have signed documents, signed protocols to make sure there is an electoral fraud or not.
Thank you, Seren. Very useful comments. This is Seren Selvin Korkmaz in Istanbul, in Istanbul, of course, obviously. So we just heard an excellent discussion of opposition strategies in the case of a runoff, and also what Seren's prediction is for an outcome that the opposition leader Kilicdaroglu is leading. Seren, you said, if I didn't understand you incorrectly, that if it is a really tightly contested race and opposition is behind, it may contest the outcome. Ragip, before I go to Emre, I want to ask you the same question. If it is the margin is really narrow, less than 1 point, or a few seats for the parliament, is President Erdogan's campaign likely to contest the outcome, given that we have a precedent in 2019 when the margin was very narrow, opposition candidate İmamoğlu won mayoral race for Istanbul and he contested the outcome? Or you think he has drawn some lessons from the past? What is your sense of that before I turn to Emre?
Yeah, actually, I think the government will try to repeat the elections if the margin is low. They will use this issue, but I'm not sure that they have learned from the past mistake of 2019. That's why if the margin is low, the government will do. But Soner, I would like to highlight one issue. Generally, when we get these questions about the electoral fraud, it's often asked about the problems in the election day. But I think the government did their best to make sure that there is an unfair, uneven electoral playing field. Even the registration of the people who lives in earthquake areas is still problematic. They didn't have enough time. So that's why they did their best to affect this electoral outcomes. But I don't think that if the margin is high, Mr. Erdogan will contest this election. So still, I believe that there will be a smooth transition if the margin is high. But if the margin is low, we will have probably so many discussions after the elections on Monday.
Great point, Seren, on the unfair nature of the campaign. In fact, that's some of my talking points coming up. But before I move over to Emre and look at his prediction for the outcome and also the runoff, I wanted to ask the same question to Ragip. If the outcome is really narrow, Ragip, for the presidency, 1 point, less than 1 point, or a few seats for the parliament, would President Erdogan's campaign contest the outcome, given that we have a precedent of Erdogan contesting outcomes of races he has lost in the past, such as the Istanbul mayoral race in 2019?
I mean, I think I'm just going to give you a similar response, which is he will ask for a recount, which is legal. But if you remember 2019 elections, İmamoğlu was declared as the winner after the recount, and he got his mandate, the official certificate, and he started to administer the municipality. And then in a week time, the High Election Board decided to cancel the elections and call for a rerun. But this round, if you look at the issue again, you realize that the High Election Board is now consists of a different personnel, different judges, and they've been more careful somewhat and trying to maintain their neutrality. And they made a lot of decisions against the government wishes. So it just depends on what the High Election Board decides. But Kilicdaroglu, already said that if they cancel the election and do run a rerun, that he would still participate and he would just still win the next elections. So I don't see any, deep debate about this. Of course, if it is really close call and if it's really tight, you cannot break it. Of course, there might be a rerun. But as Seren said, I don't expect that will be the right call, that the government would go down for the road. I mean, they tried it in 2019. It didn't work. I don't think it will work this time around either.
Great. Thank you, Ragip. This is excellent points and good scoops also. Appreciate it. I want to continue on. If you have started to dial into this conversation, or if you dialed in after we got started, rather, once again, you're listening to a policy forum discussion at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. My name is Soner Cagaptay. I'm a Bayer Family Fellow and Director of Turkish Research Program here. I'm joined by Ragip Soylu, Turkey Bureau Chief of Middle East Eye from Ankara, Executive Director of Istanbul, an Istanbul-based think tank, Seren Selvin Korkmaz, and of course now next is Emre Peker. He's the Europe Director at Eurasia Group. Emre, what is your prediction for the outcome? I know you don't have a crystal ball. I have so many friends who've been asking me this, and I tell them 50-50. But can you tell us something more than that for both the presidential race and the parliamentary race, and also your prediction, your outlook for the runoff? including, I guess, how Europe views this, because I will introduce the US angle in a little bit. It'll be great to hear that from you as well.
Sure. Thank you, Soner, for the opportunity to participate in the panel today. So I'm not quite 50-50, although I think, as Seren and Ragip also pointed out, that's what the polls would tell us on the face of it. On the presidential election, I still think Erdogan has a slight advantage over Kilicdaroglu, and I'll get to the reasons in a second. And on parliament, I would agree with Seren that the opposition, the entire opposition, together with the left-wing alliance and the main six-party nation alliance, led by the CHP, have an advantage over the Erdogan alliance, comprising predominantly the AKP and its nationalist party, the partner, the MHP. So my expectation is for Erdogan to win the presidency in a second round runoff, and the opposition to secure a slim majority in parliament this Sunday. Where we land in terms of Kilicdaroglu and Erdogan rankings after the first round is very difficult to call. When you look at the poll results with the undecided not distributed, Kilicdaroglu seems to be leading with by a point or two, which is all within the margin of error, to be frank. And neither candidate seems to be pushing meaningfully past 45%. They seem to be, it seems to be like Erdogan's around 41, 42, Kilicdaroglu is around 43, 44, with the rest of the votes going to the fringe candidates, Ince and Oğan. The Ince dropout, I think, benefits Oğan to an extent. And the unhappy AKP voters that we've been talking about, I think, find a comfortable home in Oğan's movements and candidacy. Similarly, sort of hardline secularist, nationalist opposition voters in the Kilicdaroglu camp that are uncomfortable with Kilicdaroglu's partnership with Kurdish parties, left-wing parties for the presidential race, might tactically vote for Oğan in the first round. That said, I do agree with, I think, everyone's view that there could be a surprise on Sunday and we see a winner emerge. And that would be, I think, primarily contingent on Oğan significantly underperforming the 5% we're seeing at the polls now. And Ince votes, except with the exception of the ones cast abroad already, breaking probably to the benefit of Kilicdaroglu, giving him a point boost or so. If it ends in the first round, then I would be wrong, and I think Kilicdaroglu would have a leg up and would stand a slightly higher chance than Erdogan of finishing first. But given the fact that Oğan is drawing heavily from AKP and MHP supporters as well, there's a chance that we might see a last-minute surge in Erdogan votes that pushes him barely beyond 50%. So if we know one thing, that is that the uncertainty is very high and it's very difficult to call. But I think one thing I want to highlight was that in the polls, especially in the polls conducted by Turkish pollsters, there's a lot of focus on the horse race and less focus on the issues and on the incumbent versus challenger dynamics. And when we, to the extent that we can get the data, when we unpack that, we see Kilicdaroglu and Erdogan somewhat head-to-head, with Kilicdaroglu maybe having like a minor advantage on economic issues, despite Turkey living through its worst economic conditions, flirting with a crisis for the past worst conditions for the past 2 decades, and constantly on the brink of a crisis. But on other issues, such as family values, terrorism, national security, Erdogan has a big lead over Kilicdaroglu. And similarly, Kilicdaroglu has a big lead on issues like rule of law, justice, democracy. So, but these issues are all secondary to the economy, where the two candidates seem to be head-to-head. So all of this point to a very tight race. I think incumbency powers, such as getting out to vote, these issues around registrations, voter turnout in regions affected by the devastating February earthquakes, the mobilization of voters abroad, etc., all somewhat benefit the incumbent. So they probably give Erdogan a bit of a push. And I'm less sanguine than Ragip and Seren are about irregularities and risks to the candidates accepting the results come election night because of 2019 Istanbul, because of 2014 Ankara elections, and because of the 2.5 million votes that weren't in properly stamped envelopes that were counted in the 2017 referendum. So those all give me pause, despite the robust electoral system in Turkey. In terms of relation,
I think you're referring to 2017 vote for changing the constitution that switched to the executive style presidential system, in which the electoral board agreed to count 2.4 million ballots that are not stamped, right? So,
yeah,
right.
And Erdogan won that referendum by 1.4 million votes.
Okay, yeah. Continue. I didn't mean to interrupt. Sorry. Thank you.
So no worries. And then you asked about EU's relations with Europe. I mean, sorry, not EU's relations with Europe are great, of course, but Turkey's relations with the EU and Europe. And on that front, I mean, two different outcomes, two different results. If Erdogan is reelected, I would expect more of the same, despite the calm intentions with Greece and Cyprus and somewhat good working relations with the EU on a host of issues. You know, the Turkey's EU perspective will continue to be severely curtailed and a non-actor in relations. I would anticipate continued ongoing occasional tensions and very transactional relationships. If Kılıçdaroğlu is elected, I think there's going to be a big push to re-anchor Turkish foreign and security policies in the West, and also re-energize economic ties and links, particularly with Europe. The opposition party members that I speak with often talk about re-energizing and restarting the accession process. I think from a Brussels perspective, and for a lot of EU capitals, especially given the debates around the Ukraine war and Ukraine's accession ambitions into the EU, is a non-starter. So Turkey and the EU will have to find a good new modus vivendi to reset their relationship. There are good, strong avenues to do this. Visa liberalization that couldn't be done under Erdogan is one, although I do see challenges there, happy to unpack. Updating the customs union, similar, ran into the ground under Erdogan, could be re-energized. Kılıçdaroğlu's promise to align Turkey's regulatory and legal framework and economy with the European Green Deal ambitions is definitely helpful and progressive. So I would expect that to be helpful. Migration, as with Erdogan, will be an issue under the Kılıçdaroğlu administration as well. So not easy issues. I think the rhetoric and the approach will be a lot more positive. But as Turkey takes a step or two towards the EU would really have to come running towards Ankara and embrace it and make good of this opportunity, or it will have a very disappointed and government in Ankara with its credibility undermined, because a key pillar of its policy orientation will be undermined by the response it gets from the West. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Emre. Really great comments, both regarding Turkish EU ties, how they'll evolve under an Erdogan presidency versus a Kılıçdaroğlu win, but also your predictions, I guess, kind of looking at Erdogan's incumbent advantage, but as well as the many surprises that the runoff period may hold for us. I'm going to take my oath as a moderator in a second and do my own part, provide some comments on the campaign, my prediction of the outlook, and also U.S. policy. But I have one question for you, Emre, before I do so. So of the policy instruments you highlighted under a potential Kılıçdaroğlu presidency, were you most optimistic about, as compared to restarting accession talks and visa liberalization, were you most optimistic about deepening and modernization of customs union as an area, if Kılıçdaroğlu wanted to pivot to Europe, that Europe would respond positively to Ankara? Or or I don't want to put words in your mouth. I just want to see if you could kind of rank these three policy instruments and see which is the most likely outcome of first rapprochement.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, on accession, I don't anticipate any progress. I think you might restart talks and the process and maybe open some chapters and update where we stand. But in terms of like Turkey's real ambitions or the reality of Turkey becoming an EU member, I don't think that's feasible. On customs union, I think there would be very strong support both in Turkey and across Europe to do that. But doing it would be a very hairy process because A, the agreement is very old. B, it would inadvertently have to go into areas like agriculture where Europe is very defensive and Turkey is very offensive. And C, opening up the services part a little bit more, services liberalization might not indeed be in Turkey's interest. So it would be a hairy discussion, but I think we could get there. Visa liberalization, Kilicdaroglu has promised to deliver within 2 months, 3 months. That I think the last time there was a comparison of notes, Turkey was not, short 6 of the 72 benchmarks that it needed to fill in the years that have since passed. With some of the rule of law backtracking in Turkey, I imagine there are more benchmarks to be ticked off now. And it requires changing of some of the counterterrorism laws in Turkey. And with the EU party in coalition, and given an AKP opposition that would be severely critical of any weakening of counterterrorism laws by an incoming Kilicdaroglu administration, it will not be an easy task, particularly because in parliament, the Nation Alliance will rely on the pro-Kurdish YSP vote, the Green Left Party, and other left parties to pass the legislation. So this is a hairy issue as well. So I don't think any of these are easy to deliver, but it depends on political will and political cunning.
I agree with you. I think the modernization of customs union is probably the easiest of these policy tools. That's significant because I would say, notwithstanding President Erdogan's partially successful efforts to change Turkey's identity at home, secular to more Islamic, internationally, more from European to Middle Eastern, as a fact, Turkey's economy is completely integrated with the EU because of customs union in place since 1995. EU is still the major provider of foreign direct investment, maybe up to 70%, and major trading partners. So a deepening of customs union, even if other elements of rapprochement are not there, would both anchor this relationship and also, of course, have a multiplying effect on Turkey's economy. I know that we have, I've just looked at the list. This is an amazing conversation. I'm learning a lot. Thanks to everyone. And we have a really great list of attendees who have registered, invitees to attend this event. We also have thousands of people watching us on YouTube. This is a public event. Tweet it as you like and learn from it and take advantage of it. But also, if you have questions, we have a Q&A function on the Zoom webinar page. You can, if you're registered, you can type your questions in. And if you are on YouTube, you can send an email to us at policyforum@washingtoninstitute.org. I'll answer them. What I want to do next is take my hat off as a moderator and add a little bit more context on the outlook, my own take, as well as U.S. policy. And then I already have questions coming up, so I'll come to my colleagues and then we'll kick off the discussion. So I think that, to me, the most fascinating part of this campaign has been how President Erdogan has leaned on, I guess, what Emre called his incumbent advantages, what I would call his complete control of most institutions and information flow to narrow the gap between himself and Kilicdaroglu. That gap was nearing double digits, perhaps, before the earthquake and around that time, and now it's down to maybe margin of error. That's quite a formidable achievement for President Erdogan. I think it was mostly thanks to his control of information flow. There was very little discussion in Turkey of whether government agencies were quick to deliver aid, whether there had been corruption that had resulted in some of these buildings collapsing and at least part of the casualties after the earthquake. Instead, the discussion immediately moved to Turkey being a major industrial military power, and that the earthquake was force majeure. Railways had been moved by 10 meters, 30 feet. So no one could have built strong enough or delivered the right kind of assistance after the earthquake. I think that's an interesting take for us. That 90% of the media in Turkey is controlled by President Erdogan's loyalists or businesses that are favorable to him, and 80% of Turkey's citizens cannot read languages other than Turkish. So President Erdogan can pretty much curate the news and reality for 4/5 of Turkey's population. I think that has helped him narrow the gap, together with İnce, who I think is a really significant third poll candidate. I would say while his support has dropped, and I think that's why he dropped out of the race, because he realized he was going to poll maybe 1% or less. It was significant that he entered the race after the earthquake. I think he capitalized on voters disgruntled with the political elites in general, especially younger voters. That's where he got his base. And of course, he had a really impressive social media presence that I think far outstripped the financial means of his party. Was polling at 10% and above at a time. And I think that denied Kilicdaroglu the natural momentum as the front-runner candidate. Of course, since that momentum, I think, with being denied, perhaps Kilicdaroglu could not comfortably cross the 50% threshold, something he would have done easier were İnce not in the race today. So that leaves us with a very competitive race. I also expect the vote to be hotly, this is, I think, maybe a statistical dead heat, but it looks like the presidential race is going to go to a runoff. And if Oğan dropped out, this is one major takeaway for me from the briefings of my colleagues here, done in an excellent way, is that if Oğan were to drop out, I guess his base would mostly migrate to Erdogan, and that could give him a last-minute drop. So something important for us to watch. I think what is going to be interesting is in the runoff, whether President Erdogan is going to double down on some of the rhetoric targeting the opposition as quote-unquote terrorists, and or if he's going to bring out new elements of surprise. It's, of course, goes without saying that while Erdogan has leaned onto his incumbent advantage, just information flow and perhaps some support to İnce's campaign on social media to narrow the gap with Kilicdaroglu, the race is still very competitive. Kilicdaroglu still seems to be leading. And I think this is really the most important vote in Turkey's history since the 1950 vote, the first free and fair elections, of course. I think US policy is basically at this stage between a rock and a hard place. Obviously, US policy is interested in democratic, peaceful transition. But if the race is contested, for example, what do you say? Do you say something that President Erdogan can then take and turn the US into a punching bag and saying Americans are interfering in our elections? Or do you stand with election integrity and still speak up? There are short-term issues, NATO's expansion, of course, including Sweden. I think the Swedes are probably with the one nation that are watching this race most closely. They're saying nothing, of course, but trying to see what the outcome would be. The expectation is that whoever wins, Sweden should be joining NATO at the Alliance's Vilnius summit. So perhaps the US policy is also taking the long-term view of saying, we just would like to work with the winner, hoping that the race is free. The race has not been fair, but I think the vote will be free. Turkey's citizens have a long tradition of voting in free elections. Citizens love to vote. In most cases, people's grandparents or great-grandparents have voted. Turkey's citizens have voted longer than the citizens of Spain have in free and fair elections. So it's impossible, I think, for the race to be unfree. But whether or not either side will contest the outcome if the race is very close, I think we have heard from both panelists that will be the case. I want to wrap up here because I see a bunch of questions coming in. And I want to ask the first one. I think it applies to all of my three friends in this panel, Ragip, Seren, and Emre. The Kurdish vote in Turkey, it's split, of course. Maybe half of it goes to pro-Kurdish HDP, People's Democratic Party. A large percentage is still with President Erdogan's AKP, conservative Kurds and some urban middle-class Kurds, many of which lifted out of poverty by Erdogan. And of course, some other Kurdish voters now probably voting for CHP or other parties. But how does that work out in a runoff? Does HDP stay steadfast, especially if it looks like, for example, opposition has won the parliament with HDP support? So that would mean Kilicdaroglu would have not the majority of seats, but with HDP's seats, it would have majority of the seats. And I just want to see kind of take comments and reactions from the panel. HDP's support to Erdogan or to the opposition bloc, based on your base scenarios. I think if Erdogan's bloc, let's say, is winning a majority, I guess that will be for Ragip. How is his relationship going to be with HDP base? And for Seren, if Kilicdaroglu's bloc it has one majority or has the most number of seats, and neither bloc has a majority, and it looks like he can sustain a majority with HDP support. And for Emre, you can take either of the scenarios or both of them. I guess we can start with Ragip, and next time I'll start with Emre.
I mean, for the second round, I don't expect any difference in Erdogan's policy vis-a-vis Kurds, because he already got Kurdish Islamist Hüdapar to basically retain his conservative voters, because people always talk about how controversial Hüdapar is, but they also forget to mention that they're really Kurdish nationalists as well. They have a Kurdish nationalist, and anti-Kemalist agenda, which promotes Kurdish language and education and Kurdish cultural rights, among everything else. But, there are already allegations that Erdogan tried to talk to Abdullah Öcalan, the imprisoned leader of PKK, and tried to get some sort of a statement of a deal. We know that it didn't work in 2019 mayoral elections. Öcalan came up with a statement several days before the vote, and it didn't work. I don't think it will work again. So I don't see much going on in that front, and I expect that the HDP voters and the Kurds in majority would retain their support to Kilicdaroglu.
That's a significant take, because we have seen at least kind of a direct targeting of HDP in some of the media and among some pundits, kind of saying the PKK is a terror designated entity. HDP supported it by the PKK, and ergo Kilicdaroglu is backed by terrorists, all in quotes, of course. And so my question, I guess, Seren, turning to first, I hope I was not wrong to jump to conclusion and say that you think that opposition bloc will be the largest in the parliament, or perhaps come close to winning majority. If you can explain that for us, I think you explained your take on presidential vote, but not parliamentary vote, and then also talk about the Kurdish vote in the runoff.
My expectation for the parliamentary majority, it seems that with the unified joint lists of the opposition bloc, they probably more close to get the parliamentary majority with the also support of the third alliance, including the pro-Kurdish HDP. So this means that in any case of the scenario, whether the opposition takes the executive power, they have to negotiate with the HDP in the parliament for the transition to the parliamentary system, or for certain significant reforms. Not only they can do with the executive power, some of the reforms, but they need HDP support for certain regulations, as well as it will also create an open dialogue for the future of country, for the promises of the opposition regarding the redemocratization process. But regarding the Kurds voice, I was in the field in pro-Kurdish cities in Diyarbakır, Batman, and Bitlis, Van. So what I have seen briefly. First of all, Mr. Kilicdaroglu was the preferred candidate by Kurds. So his candidacy mobilized Kurds, first of all. And secondly, can you hear me? I think it's freezing. Yeah, okay, great. And secondly, Mr. Kilicdaroglu is a leader who can create alliances in a very successful way. So that he made ensured the Nation Alliance he made ensure that the Nation Alliance stay together, but also he take the support of the pro-Kurdish HDP. That's why now, if you watch the political campaigns of the HDP in Kurdish cities, they are very enthusiastically campaign for Mr. Kilicdaroglu. And Mr. Kilicdaroglu's rally in Van I think it's also interesting for Turkish people to see this growth in that. So that I expect in pro-Kurdish areas a high support for Mr. Kilicdaroglu in the second round. So please look at the vote percentage at that day, and we will see a very high vote support for Mr. Kilicdaroglu. And one thing is very important. The promise of opposition alliance is, first of all, ensuring redemocratization and reinstating the rule of law in Turkey, and also abolishing the appointing trustees to the municipalities in Turkey. Most of the Kurdish mayors have been jailed, and now trustees are ruling Kurdish municipalities. So these three issues are very important. And also reinstating the rule of law means that some Kurdish political figures might have freedom after the judgment, after the justice, if they initiate independent justice in the Turkey. So that this also creates hopes among Kurdish population and ensures their support for Mr. Kilicdaroglu. For Mr. Erdogan's support, it seems not possible to gain a Kurdish voice between two rounds because they lost their credibility. They might talk to Mr. Öcalan, or they might target opposition by their cooperation with the HDP, but I think they lost their trust. But when we look at the opposition, they have a chance to create a new page, to open a new page between Kurds and Turks in this new era. That's why I think Kurds' support to opposition seems a little bit sticky. So that. Yeah.
Thank you, Seren. I agree with you. I think that we might see such outcomes in Kurdish majority provinces in support of Kilicdaroglu, and of course his party CHP, that this might be the most number of votes the CHP will ever get in Kurdish provinces since Turkey became a democracy in 1950. So it will be an historic record. Emre, I want to go to next.
May I add one word?
Yes,
sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot to mention, and for the first time after many years, the CHP probably get the MPs in Van, Diyarbakir, and Urfa, which are very important, prominent Kurdish states. So it will also give a sign for us for the opposition support.
Thank you. I agree. I just want to go to Emre next. Emre, you also have two fingers from earlier. I apologize. Please feel free to add that as well.
No, sure. Just on the customs union point you made, Soner, I wanted to mention that Cyprus remains a stumbling block, right? So it's, in terms of political willingness and support from the business community and what makes most sense, it's probably the easiest item. In terms of the politics, it would have to go in parallel to reinvigorated reunification talks in Cyprus between Turkish and Greek Cypriots. There is a political desire, I think, to do that on the island, but then how the EU actually positions itself as a player can't actually nudge the Greek Cypriot government to be a little bit more constructive towards a settlement on the basis probably of 2004 Annan plan again would be key, because otherwise anything you negotiate could get vetoed at the council. So that's an aside. On the other points, I think I wholeheartedly agree with Seren's point about Kilicdaroglu's success in forging, and maintaining alliances. I think that's been the biggest upside and surprise on the opposition side in this campaign, especially since he affirmed his candidacy. The big question I have with regards to HDP YSP support is not in the first round, where the very motivated and very conscious Kurdish voters and HDP voters more broadly will go to the ballots to vote for the parliamentary elections anyway, and meanwhile stamp for Kilicdaroglu. The question is, what will happen in a runoff if that's the world we're living at, and whether Kilicdaroglu can maintain that Kurdish support motivate a good 10-12% of the voters to go to the polls again, and I'd be interested to hear views on this too, when they don't have their own horse in the race, so to say. So that's one question. Obviously, the key motivation for Kurdish voters would be the release of Selahattin Demirtas from prison when Kılıçdaroğlu administration comes in, and a promise by Kılıçdaroğlu that come local elections in March 2024, for a change, we will not be wiping clear your mayors and arresting them. Your elected mayors will get to serve their positions. I mean, these are very important and dear to Kurdish voters' hearts. But if Kılıçdaroğlu makes that promise, does he then risk alienating Republican or nationalist voters who have backed him in the first round and exposing himself to attacks by Erdogan, saying, you know, free Demirtas today, free Öcalan tomorrow, and before you know it, the Southeast will split from Turkey and the country will be up in flames, etc. Because this kind of rhetoric is already playing out in the campaign trail, including with video montages and so forth. So I think that's a blessing and a curse for Kılıçdaroğlu, and his ability to manage that and maintain Kurdish voter mobilization into a second round will be very important.
Thank you, Emre. We have a bunch of questions waiting and not much time left, so I'm going to ask for quick answers, since I promised I would start with the Emre for you. Transition, a friend is asking, could the new parliament possibly sit before a second round of the presidential election? Is that technically possible? And also others want to weigh in as well, but Emre to first.
Yeah, technically and legally, yes. The High Supreme Election Council said it will publish the results of the May 14 vote by May 19. In the past, we've seen the calendar date slip, but assuming they do, the moment the official results are published in the official gazette, the parliament has to convene within 3 days to start the oath-taking ceremonies. So if the calendar holds, then we will have a sitting parliament by the time we head into the second round. Of course, what the election council does is anyone's guess, because stranger things have happened.
Seren
and
Ragip, did you want to weigh in also on this question?
No, I think it's really briefly, it's really correct. Whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah, all right. So look for the electoral board's decision, which has or has not in the past, I think, taken cues from President Erdogan at times. I would think maybe answering this, it will completely depend on whether President Erdogan thinks momentum is on his side, and if he has won the parliament or has the biggest bloc, of course, he'll be interested in having the results published so he looks like the winner. And if it doesn't look like he has the momentum, of course, he's going to want to deny the opposition the momentum, and it's unlikely that the parliament will be seated. Question to everyone. There are claims that Russia interfered in the Turkish elections. Are these claims true? Whoever would like to go.
May I jump in?
Yes, please.
Actually, Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu has warned Russia to not interfere Turkish internal issues if they would like to keep their relations with Turkey. Actually, as a person who closely follows Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu's as an analyst, I can say that he made these kinds of statements with strong evidence. Without evidence, he is not a political leader to go with that kind of statements. That's why I think there is an interference. And we have heard so much rumors, we have heard so much news about that. So I think that there might be, it might be true. And one thing, today, Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu in a rally has to wear a bullet-proof vest. So because of the assassination intelligence to him, so that we are going to in a very tense electoral period, and also there are so many disinformation, and this is one of the claim of the opposition. There is Russia behind this disinformation and some dark web issues. So that these are the issues which dominates Turkish politics, especially for two or three weeks. And he explained that it might be Russia, there might be Russia behind all of these issues. And we know that there are so many interferers of the Russia, especially regarding the disinformation issue during the electoral process in different countries. That's why I think they have an evidence, and they have explained that they have an evidence, so that I think they are preparing to the election day in case there is a kind of attacks regarding the cybersecurity attacks or cyber attacks, etc. So.
Thank you, sir. Others would like to join? Or
so now, just very quickly, I think, I mean, like all valid points by Seren, but I would also point to what has been done and what we know. Russia transferred something to the tune of $10 to $15 billion to Turkey last summer. There are deferred payments for gas, and there's discussions or in effect discounted gas purchases by Turkey. And Moscow is mediating normalization talks between Turkey and Syria. These four factors alone have been very helpful to Erdogan, and clearly I think Putin is betting for an Erdogan win and working to help that.
Doubtless, I think that is the case. I think Putin has already decided, that he wants Erdogan to win. But I'm going to use that as a corollary to ask Ragip a question. So, of course, Putin has given Turkey a delay on natural gas payments, reduced prices. And President Erdogan, of course, magically declared that Turkey found natural gas and that this is going to be free below a certain consumption level amount to all households. Ragip, a question about trickle-down effect of election economics. Generous social security benefits, generous wage increases. These write-offs on natural gas bills. You've argued in the piece you have written for us for the Washington Institute. If those of you online, you haven't seen this, this is our policy note that was published on our website. It's a set of collected essays, and Ragip and Seren are both contributors, as well as myself. This is at washingtoninstitute.org, where you can download it. But a question for you, Ragip, is can you see other game changers in this regard in the runoff, or maybe even tomorrow, kind of new trickle-down effects of election economics? You said earlier, for example, Erdogan running with the Turkish intelligence chief Hakan Fidan could be a game changer as Fidan and his vice president. Are there others, based on, Ankara, insider Ankara talk, that we could expect, or has President Erdogan kind of exhausted all these means? A very quick answer, so I could do one more question, please.
I think there are no more options. If there is any yet, I think it's not going to create the impact that people hope for. But going back to Russian interference, what Emre said, I agree totally, all of the points, which one of the senior opposition officials today he cited all of them as in terms of Russian interference into elections. But in terms of direct intervention in the sense that, deep web or, a Russian disinformation operation in the sense using hackers, etc., they only say that they believe there are Russian companies involved in those efforts, but they fail to present any evidence. So the Turkish opposition, if they want to take it seriously on this issue, they need to present evidence. They need to give out those names of those Russian companies, whoever they are. We are yet to see them.
Got it. And final question to wrap up. Two questions that are corollary of each other. It's about Turkish-EU ties that we have seen deterioration of ties. Turkish public attitudes towards Europe have changed. Some European countries don't want Turkey in the EU. In case of a Kilicdaroglu presidency, Emre, since you're in Western Europe, though not in the EU, will European attitudes really embrace Kilicdaroglu very quickly? 60 seconds. And for Ragip and Seren each, Turkish views of Europe, how will they evolve after the elections? If it is a Kilicdaroglu win, that's for Seren, and an Erdogan win, that's for Ragip.
Thank you, Soner. I think two things. First, a Kilicdaroglu win would result in a great sigh of relief across European capitals. And we would see probably a high-level meeting and congratulatory messages and very positive political messaging. And then the next phase would be all the EU leaders gathering in Brussels, potentially as soon as the June summit, and discussing what to do with Turkey next. Turkey is so low in the EU priorities at the moment, which are centered around the war in Ukraine, the green transition, trade issues, economic growth, etc., that no one wants to think about all the complex issues with Ankara and how to handle them. So finding a framework will be the first order of business before any meaningful steps can be taken.
I agree. I sometimes joke that Turkey will enter the EU during the Kosovo presidency. Ragip, 30 seconds, Turkish views of EU if Erdogan wins, and then we'll wrap up with Seren.
I mean, you're talking about the public or the government?
Public, yeah, mostly public. Or government. You can. Why don't you do government also? Perfect.
I mean, the public, I think it will remain stable, maybe more European looking as well, in the sense that, you know, Erdogan policies might get even worse in coming period, or might get even better, who knows? But I think it will be somewhat the same.
All right. Seren?
Yeah, in case of opposition win, I think Turkey-EU relations and Turkey-West relations will be improved. First of all, even if there is a historical challenge and there might be points that cannot be changed, I think the rhetoric will be changed, and early steps of the new government will be related to the reinstating the rule of law and redemocratization attempts, and creating a multilateral relations rather than a personalized relations, so that I think these all will help to improve Turkey's relations with the West. And also they insist that they will make sure the reinstitutionalization, which means instituting a foreign policy that's not based on domestic and political calculations and ideologies, and also a foreign policy which based on the traditional foreign policy making rather than a personalized policy making, so that it will all help.
Excellent, thank you. I agree. I think Erdogan's brand unpredictability is what will guide Turkish EU ties and Turkish US ties and Turkish foreign policy in general, and kind of then institutionalized, more predictable foreign policy in case of a Kilicdaroglu win. This was a great panel. I learned a ton, but we're out of our time. And I think we need to bring it to an end. We have thousands of people listening to us. I want to thank everyone who joined. I actually looked, we had a few thousand people from Sweden listening to us. So I think the Swedes are interested in the outcome. As everybody else says, we're all watching this. I want to give a round of virtual applause to my colleagues for joining us. Thank you guys, Ragip, Seren, Emre, taking time from your schedules. And if you're not following any of my co-panelists on Twitter, please do sign up to their newsletters, watch their YouTube videos. Emre also puts out excellent analysis through Eurasia Group. Subscribe to that, and also do the same for Ragip and Seren as well. Thank you everyone for joining. Great conversation. We'll be publishing more of our work on our institute website at washingtoninstitute.org. If you haven't downloaded our reports yet, visit it, download our reports, look at our videos, and get ready for a very exciting and historic election season in Turkey. And have a great day. Thank you, guys.